Good
Good
evening.
evening.
Good evening, CDN radio listeners, as well as everyone who's joining us via Facebook Live on TDN Network, as well as Push Past 10. So we are here. A pleasant good evening to you. Welcome to a special presentation of TDN Network and Push Past 10. October is designated as Domestic Violence Month. So, thank you for joining us as we explore the topic of domestic violence in our society. I am Simone Matthew, and joining us today, we have two experts. Mr. Rasmo will be joining us in just a little while, but we also have Mrs. Delia Cuffy Weeks in Dominica. And as I mentioned before, Mr. Rasmo Moses will be joining us from California in a little while. So as you continue to come in to join this conversation, of course, we are looking forward to hearing your contribution on the topic. So feel free to post your comments during this presentation. And don't forget to share the live. Let everyone know that we're here as you're coming in. Also, let us know where you are joining us from. So don't forget to like and share this important conversation. So let's go ahead and welcome our guest to the program, Mrs. Delia Cuffy Weeks, as we get the conversation started. So Delia, welcome to the program. How are you?
Program. I am doing well, praise God, and I am hoping that you are also in good health and our guests will participate with us. They will learn new things and they can also share with us so that by the time the program is over, we will all be more educated, more enriched because of this interaction.
Yes, and I think this is such an important conversation that we're having this evening. So I'm really happy that you, as an expert, you're taking some time off your busy schedule to be with us. So I think there was an introduction video that we wanted to run as well. So our producer, Mr. George, in the control room, if you have that video ready to go, we will take a listen and then we'll get started.
Control, power over mind, over body and soul. It's all about power, power and control. Power over mind, over body and soul. It's all about power, 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 power. Someone trying to have control over another in an existing or past relationship. It's all about control, 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 control. Someone trying to be captain of the ship, whether it is sunken or it is afloat. It's all about power, whether direct or remote. Yes, it's all about power, power and control, power over mind, over body and soul. It's all about power, power and control, power over mind, over body and soul. Oh, na na na. Ooh.
Yes, so a very important song, and we want to thank Rasmo for being the composer and the producer of that particular piece. But I think it is so important, some of what he's mentioned in the song, Delia. So if we have an opportunity, maybe we can play the full song. But one of the things that he talks about as we get the program started is power and control. So, in your mind, would you say that that is the basis of where domestic violence stems from in the house? One particular person wanting to have complete power and control over one or several people.
That is exactly what it is, Simone. And until we understand what is the root of the problem, then we can continue treating the symptoms, but the problem will always remain there and then different symptoms will show up at different times. And we really have to get down to the root of the problem. And so we can identify it in all of its subtle forms, because that is how some people get caught in a trap. And by the time they realize where they are, it has been going on for so long, but they missed all of the red flags.
Yeah, so I think an important place to get started with the program is just defining domestic violence. So, in your professional experience, how do we even define domestic violence?
The thing about it is, domestic violence is a term that we hear all the time. And most people have some sort of understanding, but as to how they articulate what is domestic violence, domestic violence is actually violence committed by someone in the victim's domestic circle. So that could include partners, ex partners, immediate family members, other relatives, and family friends. The term domestic violence is used when there is a close relationship between the offender and the victim.
Yes,
So
Go ahead.
that is why sometimes people suggest that we have different terminology and things are changing. And so sometimes when you say, let's talk domestic violence, somebody may say, why don't we talk intimate partner abuse? But it is not just that. Because based on the definition that I've given you, you can see that children may be victims of domestic violence. It does not always have to be between intimate partners.
Yeah, and we have so much to cover. As a matter of fact, there's so much information to cover that we are planning on making this a two-part series. So this evening we will look at the definition, the causes, who's likely to be a victim, who's likely to be a perpetrator, and then next week you can already set your reminder. Next Thursday, I believe it's the 27th or the 28th. You can join us again as we look at the implications. So the implications for children in the home, the impact of COVID-19 on domestic violence situations. But as we continue along with the program, Delia, one of the things that we know is that domestic violence includes a lot of manipulation. So can you just tell us a little bit as we delve further into the topic?
Yes, okay. So you would remember that I mentioned intimate partner violence, which is part of domestic violence, but it's not the whole definition of it. And so intimate partner violence, it refers to behavior by intimate partners or ex-partners. So boyfriend and girlfriend, husband and wife, whatever. And that kind of violence causes physical, sexual, or psychological harm, including physical aggression, sexual coercion, psychological abuse, and controlling behaviors. So if you remember, Rasmo spoke about power and control. We will see how that comes into play. So sometimes when we're looking at a problem, we need to identify in our particular context what are some of the reasons that something may happen. And you tend to find domestic violence happening in situations where there is a lot of poverty, where you have lack of a high school education. I do not want to just put it down to people being illiterate, but it's like the higher levels of education that people attain, the more they can negotiate better situations for themselves. So as you become more educated, your chances of standing more firmly on your own 2 feet and being able to negotiate out of sticky situations increase.
And wouldn't that also speak of someone's emotional intelligence? Because as you become more educated, you also have a higher level of emotional intelligence, which just means you can better manage your emotions.
Precisely. So you can manage your emotions, you can determine what you will and will not accept, and you are in a position where you can quickly nip something in the bud if it begins to happen. When people witness family violence, especially during childhood, then it becomes acceptable to them. And so they somehow, for them, it becomes a norm. So there is this funny story. It's funny now, but at the time it was the reality of the child. And children were being asked, what what do you hope to achieve by going to school? So the guy said, a little boy, he said he wanted to learn so he would be able to buy his own soft drink, meaning that he would be able to keep a job and buy his own soft drink. He doesn't want much, and to be able to get his own whip to beat his wife.
His own whip to beat his wife.
Yes. So
Oh my.
that for him was the definition of an adult male.
Right.
Being able to provide for your own needs and being in control of your woman, of your home.
Yeah, and so we see that this comes from the family environment.
Thank you very much. So he
Yes.
have seen his father beating his mother. That is what males and females, the power play. So he is hoping when he grows up, he can prove himself a man.
That
Also,
is so sad.
as you mentioned a little earlier, having a low sense of self worth. And we will touch on how it is that people develop that low sense of self worth, attitudes, prevailing attitudes of male domination within our societies, things that are accepted based on people's genders, people's sex. So men are free to do that, and if we find out, we laugh about it. But if a woman should even dare to think about doing that, then the whole society is against her.
Yeah, absolutely.
Substance abuse, we cannot get away from that, especially alcohol. Okay?
Yes, so we have a lot to cover, but as we do, let's say good evening to everyone who's joining us on the Facebook Live. We see KK is here, Louisa Jean-Pierre out there in the UK. Good evening, emotional subject tonight. Thank you, Louisa, for staying up late. We also have Tamara Karam, Choco Thomas Knight, and a few other people who are joining us via Facebook Live. So we want to welcome you, and we're also interested in hearing your contribution to the program. So again, tonight it's all about raising the awareness regarding domestic violence, because Delia, I'm sure you would agree that many of us suffer in silence.
Oh, yes, that is part of the whole thing. It is the secret that everybody knows that nobody is telling. We learn to deal with domestic violence, especially if it is not happening to us, by turning a blind eye. It is not my business. But
Yeah.
programs like what we're doing tonight, we're hoping we can educate people on understanding that domestic violence impacts everybody. And so it is our business. We're not advocating for you to jump into the middle of a family setting and try to play judge, jury, and executioner. But hopefully, by the end of our series of programs, maybe tonight and next Thursday, people can have some better ideas on how can we help without putting our own selves at risk and without increasing the risk for the victims. But there is always something that somebody can do.
Yes, and I think that is a great segue into just recognizing the signs of domestic violence. So, what are the signs? Maybe you're not immediately impacted, but you kind of get the sense that a friend, a family member, maybe a co-worker is being impacted. So, can we talk about maybe the signs to look for to know that someone is in a difficult situation?
I would prefer, first of all, Simone, to educate people that domestic violence happens not as a one-time explosion like a volcano, but it actually happens as a cycle. And you sometimes have the cycle repeating itself and some phases getting more intense over time. So there are basically three phases to domestic violence. You have tension building, when people begin to feel very antsy, so I am afraid to step out of line and whatever because I suspect something may happen. Then you have the explosive phase where the physical violence may be present. And then there is the honeymoon phase when the act has been committed, the act of violence has been committed. You had that big explosion, and then the perpetrator, who may be male or female, now is trying to pour oil over the wound. Because
But you know, Delia, I'm happy we're having this discussion because then it begs the question, after two, three, four times, shouldn't we recognize what is going on and try to extricate ourselves out of this situation?
it is not so easy, Simone. Because you see, the thing about it is, you do not have the same sort of explosion happening every time. And it does not necessarily follow in that pattern, phase one, phase two, phase three. You may have a phase one, phase two, phase three, then a two and three, and a two and a one. So sometimes people get caught between a rock and a hard place because, yes, they're experiencing domestic violence, but this is not happening in a vacuum. So we have to also take into consideration that sometimes, even when we on the outside realize that something is going on, yes, it's fine for you to say to somebody, you're in a dangerous situation, get out. But when you get out, where am I going? Who is taking responsibility? Who's going to fill that void that, yes, the perpetrator is doing this, that, and the other, but he is not or she is not 100% bad. When we're good, oh boy, it's sweet. It is just that sometimes there is a little explosion. And sometimes, as we go on a little more, when I explain how domestic violence occurs, then you realize that sometimes the victims back themselves into a corner where they begin to accept responsibility for the actions of the perpetrator.
Yeah, so let's have that discussion because I think it's important and it relates well. So how does it occur?
Okay, so remember we said that in the tension building phase, you see that the person, the abuser, is becoming angry, the person is argumentative, they using threats, or sometimes they may be more subtle and they use coercion. Or you have a little blow up, nothing much, and then they will try to apologize and they'll bring you flowers and this and that and the other. But the victim begins to feel, boy, I have to be on my P's and Q's because any little thing may set that person off. What may also happen is initially it may go from one form of abuse to another. So in a little while, we'll talk about the various forms that the abuse may have. Because physical abuse may end up very late in the cycle. And so people feel, well, I'm not being abused because Mr. just talking with his mouth and I don't worry with him. I just stay out of his way. So that when he's saying these things, I don't get a blast. But yes, the talk may eventually end up in you happen to be in close proximity and you get the first knock. Okay?
Yeah, and I think one of the unfortunate things about domestic violence is, and this is the strangest thing I've ever heard. I've actually heard women say that if my boyfriend does not put his hand on me, he does not love me. Are you familiar with that expression?
I have heard that a lot, Simon. I will also tell you that that is a legacy from slavery, because we all in the Caribbean grew up knowing that our parents would beat us, sometimes mercilessly, with all sorts of things. And then somebody will tell you, maybe somebody who witnessed the beating that you got, you must behave yourself. Your mommy love you. But my mommy just gave me a beating and marked up all of my skin. But you're telling me that the reason that I got the beating is because of love. So you grow up with this, that love includes pain. And somehow in your damaged psyche, you grow up with this. And if you meet a partner who is thinking totally different, so they will provide everything for you and they want to pamper you and all of this, but they never pinch you, they never hit you, then you're like, but he doesn't love me.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is the way that my parents showed that they loved me.
Yeah,
By
so we're delighted that
as
Rasmo,
yes,
yeah, we're delighted that Rasmo, we're delighted that Rasmo has joined us. And as we talked about, we're talking about domestic violence awareness. This being October, the month to recognize domestic violence awareness. And so far, we've looked at the definition of domestic violence. We've looked at the phases. We looked at how it occurs. We've also talked about the role of substance abuse and just the general environment, that enabling environment that many abusers grow up in, that allow them to think that abuse is a normal way of life. So, Rasmo, welcome to the program. Is there anything you would like to contribute at this point?
It's good to be here. It's good to be here. Yeah, Wednesdays and Thursdays are just tough for me. I'm, I don't know what you did. I mean, I hear you give us some ring, so I don't want to repeat everything you say. Um, I've been doing this work for years, and it's part of my life's mission to do that work. I focus a lot on and how that makes men abusive and violent, and I work to empower girls and women, and so I do it across generations in schools. I work with peer groups. I organize. I'm an artist, and I do it through the arts.
Mhm.
How on the roots of violence and the roots of the violence. We can talk about everything else, but unless if we're analyzing an issue, we have to look at the causes, what causes it.
Mhm.
And all sorts of people abuse, both genders abuse, but it's more prevalent among men. And what makes men abusive, what makes men aggressive is the idea where it comes from. It's sexism, okay, and a culture of sexism where men are supposed to be dominant, and power means to dominate, and our perception as a society of what of what power is and how we use the power that we have. So I approach your work from that level in terms of analyzing it in a scientific way. Look at the root cause,
Mhm.
and of course there's same gender, sex, but violence is predominantly a male thing. And even when I work with young men and women, and young women who are aggressive and violent see it as a form of being powerful as well, because that's what they've learned from society. So they do it to their peers, they do it to their girlfriends, they do it to their boyfriends, that they can do it too, because that's what power is about. It's about dominance. And if you look at the society, war, conquest, I mean, we have that history, and so that's my approach to the work. But
Mhm.
um, So philosophically, yeah, I look at the roots and then I look at the impact and then how to undo it. And
Well,
and the way
I'm
I do
really
it is
happy
through
that the
education.
two of you are here and joining us this evening. So let us talk about the forms of abuse because Rasmo, you talked about the genesis is violence, but it's not only physical violence that's considered domestic abuse. So I think it's important for us to have a discussion this evening about the forms of abuse. So I guess Delia will start with you, and then Rasmo will come to you.
Yeah. So I sent a video, the song. Did you play it?
Yes, we did. We
Okay.
did.
All right.
But if you would like to expound on
Let's
it,
take
you
one
can go
type at a
ahead.
time, Delia. Let's approach it that way. So, you know, so go first. I think if we start, then we can go through the list of types.
I am just going to go through the different forms of abuse that would constitute domestic violence. So there you have emotional abuse. That is where one person will put down others by making them feel bad about themselves, calling them names, belittling them, making them think that they're crazy, and playing mind games with that person. So the person doesn't even know whether they're coming or they're going because you kind of make them feel you are on that side thinking that way and everybody else thinks differently. So the emotional abuse is very powerful. We also have economic abuse where somebody else is controlling your finances. You may be allowed to have a job, but you cannot decide how the money is spent. It may even go to the point where you have to hand over your entire pay package and you are given an allowance, or you are free to get money, but you'd have to explain what you need the money for. And Simon, considering ourselves as women, we have a monthly cycle. It is a very natural thing. But how embarrassing it is every time you're preparing to go buy your pads or your tampons or whatever it is that you're using, you have to go to your husband or the abuser. I need money for pads. Or they may tell you, I will buy it for you. And most probably they grew up in a household where their mother only used Modest, which is a brand of pads. Things have changed a lot since then, but they may insist on buying Modest for you because that is what my mother used. It was good enough for her, so it should be good enough for you. So you can earn if you are allowed to earn, but you do not even have control over your finances. There is also the sexual abuse where one partner may be made to do things against their will. Sometimes we hide our heads in the sand, but sometimes women or girls can be prostituted by parents, by partners. They will drop you off and they will pick you up. You have to earn money for them. Granted, you're not a prostitute because you don't have a pimp who has so many other prostitutes working for him, but you are actually being controlled. You are sent out, you are sold for sex, and the money still does not come back to you. You also have people being forced to do things that they do not want to do. And also where there's physical violence and the perpetrator focuses on attacking the sexual parts of your body, grabbing the vagina, grabbing the butt, grabbing the breast, mashing up your face. All of that is considered sexual abuse. Children will also be used as a form of abuse because the perpetrator may not necessarily physically attack the woman, but he may make threats towards the children. And if it's a situation where children are living with one parent and have to visit the other one, then children are used as pawns. I will not allow you to see the children if you do not give me sex. Or men sometimes say, yes, I can bring maintenance for the children, but every time I bring the money, you have to pass it.
Hmm.
That is also domestic violence. All right?
Yeah, Rasma, you wanted to jump in, Delia. We'll come back to you.
No problem.
Can you hear us?
She having problem, huh?
No, no, no. You're having problems. We can't hear you. You're sticking.
Over to you.
I sticking?
Yes, go ahead. Try to go ahead. Hmm.
Ah. Okay. It's basically, but when we talk about domestic violence, it's dating violence too. People don't have to live together.
That is true.
That's
Okay, and
true.
it's different for the young generation in many ways. The control is electronic. Is the
Yes, tell
phone,
us
is
more
the
about that. That's so interesting. Tell us about it.
keeping the tabs on them. I mean, that's how you keep tabs. Where you at? What you doing? Calling at weird times. Who you with. Because the isolation is part of it too.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the control we're talking about. So for different generations, it's different, right?
Right.
This is a social media and electronic generation, Economic. So the economics, whether you live together or not, they still take control
Yeah.
of the woman who's earning, because even now we have a lot of changes in society that women earn more than their partners,
Hmm.
but the men still think they're boss, right? And
Yeah.
it's passed on to the next generation, And domestic abuse, I've been working in this thing for decades, and it's about son to his mother too, and son brother to sister.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a husband, especially the gender-based violence, because we can't separate it, right? It's gender-based, so it's also, if it's domestic, there are people who live together like brother and sister, or that type of stuff, and so they do it. I've worked with several situations where young men in battery treatment programs where they were, they'd be abusive to their mothers, because it's learned behavior.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
So we have to broaden our scope on what it really is and
Hmm.
how it manifests itself in the 21st century in a modern society. Even when women have made so many gains professionally and in society and have become the main earners. If you look at the number of young women graduating high school and college in Dominica, for example, in comparison to young men, there's a disparity, right? But I mean, like, those little guys on the streets have girlfriends who in college or who graduated college. And that's what's going on. They buy bikes with earnings from, so that's the economic. There's a big porn industry. If you force your partner to watch porn and you set those expectations in terms of sexual abuse, um so let's think about how it is in these times, how it's manifest in this generation, in these times.
And I also think too that the definition and our understanding continues to evolve because Delia, one of the things I'm
the
happy that you
definition is the same
mentioned.
thing. Is one person. The definition
But
is the
hold
same.
on, hold on,
One
hold
person
on.
having power and control over another in an existing or past relationship.
Yes,
For
but
all
hold
those
on.
different
Our
types of abuse you
our
talk about. But
our un-
it's how the definition is the same. It's consistent, it's persistent. And that is what it is. It's nothing else. But it's how it's done.
right,
It's not the definition that's changing. It changes
right,
with society. And the
right. So if
society
I
always
might
like that, like
continue.
I said, the whole gender thing. Teachers used to teach men, but women. Teachers used to teach men, but they couldn't vote. So that's a weird tradition that buys us of the long, long, long term. You check,
Yeah. So
and
if I
so
if I if I
that
can continue.
so we have to be that's what's evolving. Society is evolving, and the methods Go, Simon.
Yeah, so like I was saying, our understanding continues to evolve because one of the things you mentioned, Delia, was the idea of rape within a marriage. Because in the past, it was assumed that if you were married to someone, there was no such thing as your husband raping you. But now that we have a better understanding, we can address concerns as women being raped in their marriages. So I thought that was a very important point that you raised, Delia.
Yes, so you see, the thing about it is that, Simone, as Rasmo is rightly saying, things are changing, things are evolving, but the root cause and the problem itself is there, and it has to be addressed. Because when you say to me that, so this girl has a boyfriend, she's not living with him or anything, and he insists on buying top of the line electronics for her. She begins to feel that she is loved because she's being given material things. But what she may not be aware of is that this particular top of the line electronic device allows him to read all of her texts, all of her communications with other people. He may be able to follow her to see where she's at, and the constant checking up on you because, babes, I'm so in love with you, and all of that. That in itself is one of the red flags.
Hmm.
There is a difference in a relationship where people respect each other and they choose to inform each other of what is happening, as compared to you have to report to me. The question of sometimes the young guys dropping off their girlfriends to school, to university, and being there to pick them up. Some of the girls feel very important, but not realizing that if I pick you up at the place and I drop you off, then the time that you have to interact with others is limited. So is the subtle isolation, which is one of the other forms that we have not really mentioned. So
So it's about the warning signs. Remember, is it today we're going to talk about that? So that's a warning sign because it's about
yes,
control, the isolation.
that is what
Isolation is a
that is
warning
what
sign. You
that
know,
is actually what we're talking about. So we were trying to indicate the different forms to let people understand that it's not just because you are not being beaten that you're not in a domestic violence situation. Look for all the little flags that may appear nice and rosy on the surface, but when you really look at it deeply, then you understand that it is a strategy that is being used to lock you into that cycle of
Yeah,
domestic.
and also, if I might interject, that it's so important to see the signs early in a relationship so you can make an exit early in a relationship. Because I think sometimes what we find is, especially for young women, young girls, you think, oh, he wants to know where I am all the time. He wants to know who I am. Oh, he loves me. He cares about me so much. But it's not love. He sees you as a possession. It's being obsessed. So I think it's so important that we're talking about the warning signs because it's
but
important to catch those warning signs early to know that you need to remove yourself from the situation because we all know we're no longer listening to our parents once we become teenagers. So if you know of a young person, maybe you can share this information with them so they can actually hear it from another voice besides the parent who is telling you that this is a dangerous situation and you need to exit before you get into deep.
Yeah, because you see, sometimes we like to put ourselves in a bubble and we think, oh, I've gotten the pick of the bunch. But when everybody keeps saying to you, Simone, be very careful with this guy because he tends
Hmm.
to, but he doesn't do that to me, then you are maybe setting yourself up because you have on your rose colored glasses and you're not seeing what everybody else is seeing, or you're refusing to see because your reality is totally different. But all of this is a trap that is being sprung.
Mhm. And I also think it's important for us to consider who is more likely to be an abuser. So Rasma, I know that you do a lot of work in this area. So do we have an understanding of who is more likely? What does a typical domestic violence abuser looks
You
look
ain't got
like?
that. You ain't got that.
And then we can talk about
Listen,
what a
it's
typical
no,
victim
no,
looks like.
no. I don't have typical abuser.
Okay,
That don't exist. Honestly,
right.
there's no typical abuser. Here's the thing: society conditions men to think that they have to be in control.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you know, so some people who maybe have military training and all that stuff, they have a certain idea of what discipline is, control, and they do it to their children, they do it to their, you know, to their spouses, and they have that idea. And if they're in a club, a cricket club, they try to do the same thing, run it the same way, because of their perception. So based on how you socialize, you have an idea of what relationships are,
Right.
or what a relationship should be, and what is your role in the relationship. And so it's so the man is so because he learned it somewhere. Is that either that he sees father do, or that's what he sees society, or even a man he respects, including his pastor. That's how we see pastor run the church and have
There's,
how many women in the church and what and what and what. You know what I mean? So it's not typical. It goes across class. I know people in Santa Roma because I lived there in my youth when I going to grammar school. I know people in Santa Roma that live in the same house and the man and the woman do talking. They just don't talk to each other because it's so, you know what I mean? It's so bad. And the children, everybody ride the car to work and school in the morning and they go back together. But that is such a dysfunctional, that is how our society is. That is how it is. And that is why we need, here's the thing, we talk about relationship violence and domestic abuse in a bubble as though it were, here's the thing. And men are victims of this thing too. Sexism. You cannot talk about domestic violence and not talk about sexism. What is sexism? What is male privilege? Okay? What is male socialization? Big boys don't cry. Tout la vie, ou pas play, ou pas mal, ou this, that. You cannot cry as a man. So when you keep all those emotions inside, what happens?
it must explode somewhere. It
You
comes
explode
out.
on somebody.
All right. So listen to this, right? Listen to this. So, Dil, you're talking about the root we're talking about. Let's talk a little about the root. Because when you talk about warning signs, it's even a jump before you talk about the root causes. This socialization is something else. Big boys don't cry. Be a man. Act like a man. This is, listen, that is the poison. That is the poison. That is the virus.
Oh,
Because the
that's
privilege,
socialized.
this, any ism schism, you talk about privilege and the entitlement. Listen, the girls have to do the wash the dishes and do the thing and the thing. The boys can go and play and lime and thing and thing. Listen, that is where it starts.
But how do we combat that though, Rasmo? I know we're talking about the societal influences, which is very important, but how do we combat that?
Okay, I got 4 children. I talk to them and say, listen, I tell them how it is. I tell them this thing is fake. This thing is false. It's entitlement. It's not
And
real.
the equality of the roles of male and female children as well.
Right. So that is where it starts. It's from there, from the cradle to the grave. You have to do the work, right? Okay. But here's the thing. When a man is grown and he's been through all that socialization, and God is the head of the man and the man is the head of the woman, that is a thing we need to unto. That is not God's word.
Right.
He don't have no head in that business. It's partners.
Right.
Now
You
you're
know,
talking.
I'm telling you, this poison coming. It coming in church. It coming in. It coming all kind of our ways. It coming in the rum shop. It coming in the sports. It coming in the movies. Listen. So
Everywhere.
okay.
Right, because what you're saying, if I'm understanding you clearly, and then Delia, I'm coming over to you, is that we see in our society the male dominance, the sexism. So whether you're in church, where there's a male pastor, you're in a Catholic church, there's a female priest, you go to work, there's a male boss. But are we not seeing strides towards women taking up a lot of this leadership role? So do you think that will help to combat the power and control. No.
No, it's in the belief
No,
system. It's in the
the
belief
thing about
system.
it is
It's in the
this
belief system. Let me just say
Yeah,
one more thing, yeah?
let's go to Delia 1 second, Rasma. We'll come back to
Okay.
you.
will make his point.
Oh, good. She said,
Rascal,
let you go.
Yeah, okay, okay. Here's the thing. We have to undo that. So it has to be turned. This behavior is learned. Okay?
it is.
So one thing is we have to start teaching what's right. We have to make the wrongs right across all levels. Okay? And those that have it in their cranium, deep in their brains, we have to take it out. We have to do surgery. They have to unlearn, which means we have to teach them to unlearn that those concepts that were taught. Okay, that's the second thing, right? And then the third thing is, like I was saying, for the men who are that way, who really believe in their privilege and what maleness is and what gender is, okay, those who believe it, we have to empathize with them. Because you can't just condemn them and say, he's abusive, he this, he that. He believe it because somebody teach it to him, and you have to tell him, hey, brother, you have to be able to put your hand on him and shoulder and say, let me tell you that, no, my, you don't go and point your finger at him because he won't hear you. You have to say, hey, my brother, let us talk about this. You know, it's not your fault, you know, because this thing going on for hundreds of years. But think about it, and think about how it affects you, and think about what you're losing. When you
and also think about the quality of life you would enjoy if your wife or your significant partner wasn't feeling oppressed.
But through that empathy, and that understanding that it's not like, listen, I think there should be consequences for battering and for abuse, okay, and all that stuff. So we're not putting that aside, but the conversation about why they are the way they are, the big lie when it comes to gender, we have to undo it. And it takes some empathy. So the way we're talking here, right through in terms of the conversation, we're talking as though it's only women that being abused, the man this, the man that. But the man is a victim of the sexism thing too.
We said that from earlier clock, but generally in terms of domestic violence, predominantly women and girls. But
I agree.
Again, it comes back to our societal expectations, because even if a man were abused, if he were to go to the police station to report it, he becomes a laughing stock. Because that is something that I mentioned earlier, you were not yet on. Certain things that men can do that women cannot do, and vice versa. It is all right for a woman to report to the police that my partner has abused me physically. But should a man go to the police station to say, my wife slapped me or my wife thumped me, the regular reaction is that they're going to laugh at him and ask him whether he is not a man. So he is already intimidated by the reaction that he's going to receive, because men are supposed to be in control. If there is a beating, it has to be a man who administers a beating and not the other way around. But we have to emphasize the point that domestic violence happens across the board. Anybody can be affected by domestic violence. The most professional woman or man, the richest person, as Rasmo mentioned, the people in Santa Roma and spouses speaking to each other through the children for years. And the children understand that something is wrong. You may be married, divorced, or single. It doesn't matter what race, what religion, who earns more, it doesn't matter. You also have able-bodied people as well as people with disabilities experiencing domestic violence, and whether you gay, straight, or in between, all of that. So anybody can qualify to be a victim of domestic violence.
Yeah, and I wanna come back to that point Rasmo made, because I think it is so important, unlearning. But before we do, if you're just joining us, we're recognizing Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we are being joined by Mrs. Delia Coffee Weeks out of Dominica and Mr. Rasmo Moses out of California. And we just want to acknowledge everyone who's joining us on the Facebook Live. So Louisa Jean-Pierre said it includes causative control. Figures have drastically increased since COVID 19. And Louisa, I'm happy you mentioned that, because in our next program next Thursday, we will look at the implications of COVID 19 as well as the impact on the next generation, the children in the home. We have YL Philip, who's with us from London. So thank you for being here, YL. Agnes Brown, nice to see you. Rosamond Telemac, good night. Nice to see you, Rosamond. Beverly Johnson is watching from California. Blessed evening. And Carl Kofi James, greetings, Simone and guests. Carl, always wonderful to see you. So, Rasmo, I want to come back to you about the importance of unlearning. So, how exactly do you unlearn a behavior?
By understanding the consequences of that behavior, understanding the root of that behavior, where you learn it from, why you learn it. And if you're a person of color, if you're a black man, you know abuse, because you always crying about slavery and master and thing and thing. If you're poor, you always crying about your employer and the exploitation and the thing and thing and thing and thing and thing, right? So you know how to cry for empathy when you claim victim, right? So that is the thing. Teach empathy. Teach men to put themselves in another person's place. But also, that entitlement they feel they have. You know, and here's the thing, because it's not just domestic violence. I work with endless men in prison that wouldn't be in prison even if they didn't try to prove they were a man. Right. A provocation come up, they end up in a fight because they had to prove they were a man. They couldn't walk away from it. That is the conditioning. If they had understand, listen, I don't have to prove I'm a man, you know, because really a real man wouldn't fight. He would think of the consequences of his action. So consequential thinking. But the piece that's missing in the conversation, in undoing this thing and talking to perpetrators and men who grab onto that entitlement, you know, is that they need to understand, and you have to empathize with them. For somebody to learn empathy, they have to get empathy. Then they can give it that they are victims of sexism. And Dr. Simon, the thing he's talking about, what they lose, what they are losing, the inability to express all those emotions, you know, and we learn it from small, you know. Okay, baby cannot even talk, they cry, mama feed them. Okay, little boy, blah, 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 blah. Right. So, okay, you can cry. But the thing about it is that condition continuing for us men, you know. You know, it continuing for us because everything we hold inside. So we are big man, we don't cry again, we cannot express what we feel. Loss, physical pain, emotional pain, you know, we cannot cry. Boyfriend and girlfriend break up, teenagers, the man cannot go among his friends and cry.
Yes, it's about how do you process your emotions, because earlier on, Delia, we talked about emotional intelligence. So teaching our children, especially our boys, to process their emotions.
That's your department there, you know, sister. You know what I mean?
Again, Rasmo, I am looking at it as, where do we learn that from? Who are the people who are passing on that information?
Well, you cannot teach what you never learned. So if you as the parent never learn to process your emotions, you can't teach it. So all you're doing is whipping all day and you're teaching violence.
No, but for example, we have a lot of single parent families within the Caribbean. And 9 out of 10 of those single parent families are headed by women. We tend to raise our children differently. So we give them different chores to do. Luckily for me, my mother did not know that she had boys or girls. She knew she had children. So everybody had their week for sweeping the yard. Then your chore would change and you had to carry the water. You had to wash the plates or whatever. Everybody had their turn to iron and all of that. But there are parents, and I've heard a lot of mothers say to their boys, I want you to learn to do that because I do not want any woman to cut style on you. You're not
Mhm.
teaching your child to be an independent person who can stand on his or her own feet. The only reason I want you to learn to do those things is because I do not want any woman to cut style on you. So there you see the division of labor. That is woman's
Yes,
job.
you should be because I want you to be an equal partner in a household.
Thank you very much. I want you to
That's
be
it, my sister.
well turned
That's it.
out
That's it.
whether you are living on your own or you're living with a partner. And as a matter of fact, you should be man enough that if you're ironing and you want your partner to be as well turned out like you should even volunteer to iron the clothes if I taught you to iron better than she can
Okay.
iron.
So that is where the consequential thinking skills. If I do A, I'm gonna end up at Z. Okay, because every action has a reaction. Okay,
Definitely.
and so that is the thing. So we have to think. It's and the other thing about where they learn it from is systemic. It's systemic. It's in the system. It's in the belief system. It's in our religion. They
So
do
that's
it in
why
church every Sunday. You
that is
know,
why I
it's
say to you
it's
right
here,
now,
right? It's
that
reinforced in the
you have
courts. It's
to identify where it is and begin to unravel these
Yes.
false learnings
Yeah.
very early.
but here's
Because
the
if I,
thing.
if Rasma, I'm coming right back to you because if you notice, even in some of the hymns that we sing at church, a lot of the he has been replaced with other words to make it gender neutral. So I certainly see what you're talking about, Delia, in terms of unraveling and seeing where this systematic teaching are in our society and pretty much breaking them down and correcting them. Go ahead, Rasma.
So men, I want to go back to the empathy for men. Dile, when I say as victims, it's not as victims of domestic violence. Because like you're talking about, the statistics are real. And we have to take a scientific approach to the thing. We may know more, if we look at the numbers, we may know more victims, may know more perpetrators. But what I'm talking about is men as victim, not to domestic violence, but to sexism.
Yes, definitely.
So pass a play way. If you cannot, that was saying about. That's why I go back to the baby stage. Okay, you pass the baby stage, you grow up into a man. Okay, but you cannot cry. You cannot express all those emotions that you were supposed to, just like a girl can, right? So you like a dormant volcano, all
That
the
is
fire
correct.
down there. All right.
Because
So right. So when men understand, boy, I could have walked away from this fight. I could have turned around. I could have, just give my wife, give my girlfriend a break. Just calm down and think about it. Think of the consequences. And I hurt her, and right now, I mean, like, if I was the empathy, that is the thing. So you are self-destructive. The behavior is self-destructive, but it's because you don't have control of your thought process.
thank you.
You understand what I'm saying? So the psychological, it's undoing this thing. It's undoing this thing. Listen, if you take racism, it's like internalized oppression.
Hmm.
You don't like your hair, you have to straighten it. You don't like your color, you don't like your this, you don't like your eyebrow, you don't like. Because, you socialize to believe that you're inferior based on your nature. Kimun ouye. Kopon se neg nou ye. Kopon. So the fact that you cannot, internalized oppression more destructive. It's a lot more destructive
Absolutely.
than oppression itself.
People realize that it is
That's how they keep us down. That's how they keep us down. And the same thing happening with gender. It's happening with race. It's happening with class. It's happening with religion. I'm telling you. And so what it boils up to? Power. Who has the power? So the other thing we have to unlearn, because society tell you have that power, so you feel entitled. Poor man, you don't have no power. Okay, rich man, okay. And if you check it, it goes across the board. Able, disabled, straight, gay.
But
Class, rich, poor.
we
It's
also
about
have
power.
to we also have to look at another side of the coin, and we're getting ready to wind down in a little while. But we also have to look at the other side of the coin because what about the young men who are raised by mothers? And that can also create a situation where they get out into the streets and they feel the need to prove themselves because they've been so nurtured. I've also heard the expression that a woman cannot raise a boy to become a man. So, what does that mean? What are the implications of that
That
in
is
what we're talking about? Because, as Delia mentioned, the single mother homes.
Let me
that is
give you my observation. I'm a single mother house. I'm a single mother child. I'm a single mother child. And my mother raised me right. But I've talked to other men about it. Listen, if it children live what they learn, they learn what they live. A boy growing up with his mother, he gonna have his mother ways. His expression and it's not because he Marco, it's not because he think, but that is that's his biggest influence.
Mhm.
All right, he go out there and he start to mingle with his friends. They starting to tell him he girlish
He
because
too
I mean, like
soft.
his
He too
expressions
soft,
are
so now he has
basically
to prove
where he learned it
himself.
from. That's the most intimate. You
Yes.
understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it's like they have to get the confidence. Listen, just be yourself. Just be yourself. Real men, real boys don't cry. That is Just be yourself. It's about the self confidence. Now I'm telling you, is the so so we gotta teach it. We gotta do it in after school programs. We got to do it in Boy Scout. We have to do it in church groups. We
We
have
have
to
to
do
put
it.
across the board,
We have. It's
across
listen
the
to that.
board,
It's
and we
about.
have to
It's gotta
grab
be done.
we have to grab every opportunity that we get to do that education. Let me just share something. I went to a business place to pay some bills, and I was having a conversation with somebody in the line while I was waiting. In the conversation, I admitted to the person that I hate cooking. When I got to the cashier, she took my money and she engaged me in conversation. And she's disappointed in me as a married woman that I hate cooking. And I asked her, what is there to be disappointed about? This is my reality. I hate cooking. My husband knows that I hate cooking. He still loves me. And he does most of the cooking.
Of course.
I said
Partnership.
then to her, do you have a boyfriend? Yes. I said, it's women like you who teach men that
Mhm.
they are to expect something on the table every time they come to visit. So while you are courting the young man, even if you burn in water, but you employ your friend who likes to cook to prepare snacks every time he comes. Now, Rasmo, you know they say that the way to a man's heart is through his
Through
belly.
his stomach.
So every time he comes to your house, there's always something for him to nibble on. So the man says to himself, this is a woman that I can have a relationship with because I won't go hungry. When you're moving together, the first time he asks you to prepare something for him, you burn the water. You might end up getting a bully. There was a young guy who was also a cashier. I turned to him and I asked him, son, do you have a girlfriend? Yes, ma'am. Does she cook for you? Yes, ma'am. Have you ever asked her whether she likes cooking? No, ma'am. I said, please do that. Because you may find that she's doing it, and every time she does it, she is frustrated that this is something that she hates. But society expects her as a woman to be able to cook and to cook well. So she pressurizes herself to make sure that her man is happy. The man may be cooking better than her. We don't have a problem with a male chef, but we have a problem with a male cook.
Mhm.
Why? And it is all of this that sometimes allows the little pebbles to roll and push each other, and sometimes you have a landslide. We do not want to have landslides.
Mhm.
We do not want to have volcanic eruptions. But we have to understand that the simple things that we say and do can make or break our children. Because, yes, I may be there talking about domestic violence. I have a son who comes to me and he says, Mommy, this, that, and the other. And I may look at him and I may say, and you didn't give her a slap?
Hmm.
Because I have lost my hat as advocate and I become a typical stereotypical mother who feels that my son is a man.
Mhm.
He has to be in control. And if the woman will not allow him to be in control, then he has to beat her into submission. And many of us women are guilty for continuing the occurrence of domestic violence by our utterances, by our two-pronged tongue, that we say one thing for outsiders and we say something else to our children.
Mhm.
How I prefer to deal with this, most men love their mother or the mother figure in their life. And they might be paying most bad boy on the street, but if you touch
Mhm.
their mother is sacred. And I just ask them to treat every woman in your life the same way. Be she your daughter, your sister, your girlfriend. What you would not do to your mother, or you would not tolerate somebody else doing to your mother, do not do it to somebody else. You
Mhm.
might not raise your hand on your mother if she gets you angry. You might walk away. Boy, mama, I didn't know because I hate. Do the same thing in your own home. That is how you show that you have power and control over numero uno.
Mhm.
And
If you
so
cannot control yourself, you shouldn't be able to control anybody else.
Mhm. Yes, go
That's
ahead, Rasmus.
it.
yeah, so again, I coming back to the whole thing of consequential thinking, yeah, because like I walk across that violence is a multi-entity monster, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Okay, so gang bangers, they banging, right? They involved in gangs, they violate this, they that, this, they that, and then they're gonna have their girlfriend pregnant. I know because I'm meeting with them in groups and I work with them, and I
Mm-hmm.
hear him the stories and stuff, and nowadays they know early if it's gonna be a girl or a boy,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we're gonna talk about the business now. What you want for your daughter, you know?
Yeah, and it's also important to remember that that is somebody's daughter. So I'm sure that you use
Yeah.
that wording as well. That the person you're abusing is
Right.
somebody's daughter.
So let me tell you, them brothers, they're serious. As violent and aggressive as they are, they're thinking of that child. And I tell them, let's talk about the future because that's their heart. Be it that's their baby. All right. And I say, what you want for that child, how you want that child to be treated.
Mhm.
And I say, they're gonna see you treating their mother the way you don't want them to be treated, but they're gonna believe that is normal.
Yes.
So you got listen. And I wasn't even talking about the gang violence. I have men come back to me the next week and say, Rasmo, I know banging no more. I know banging no more, which means they leave the gang because they want to live a safe life. They don't want the children to be threatened. So they realize the consequences, and so it's about it's every opportunity, like Delia says, to create that. But it's got to be structural. It's got to be structured. We have to have programs. Let me tell you, we need non-profits in Dominica. Delia, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. But listen, what happened to civic society in Dominica? Because I know we're going to wind down, but we need to talk a little about how we're going to undo this thing.
Mhm.
Because we're talking about what it is and how it affected people
Mhm.
and how it's been happening for years.
Mhm.
But somewhere in the conversation at some point, we need to talk about how we're going to undo it. How we're going to give the next generation the tools to undo that stuff. Because you know what? Right now, with social media, this is boom, 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 blah, 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 blah. Listen, and people my age and your age are going to say, but we used to make our own group and think. No, we responsible. We're responsible for them. We owe that to those kids to create spaces we talk about healthy relationships, healthy lifestyles, parenting. Okay? Listen, it's not happening. So much isn't happening. But our social fabric, we're social animals. Are we losing the fabric that keep us together? It's like spiders without webs. How the spider
That's
gonna,
why when Rasmus, remember COVID make us socially distant.
The of us are
But we're
within.
still social animals.
But here's the thing. The thing about it is, if we have the fabric, we have the organizations, they can create the educational programs that can reach those kids wherever they are. They can reach them at home. It can be youth friendly. It can, you know what I mean? We're not thinking our society isn't addressing the social conditions. It isn't. It isn't.
Yeah,
It's not.
I think that is a great segue into our next discussion. So I think our focus next time should be therapy, the work that you do, Rasmo, with the arts, the drummings, the therapy, the implications of COVID-19, the implications on children. How do we unlearn this behavior? So I think that we have a lot to talk about. So I'm really happy that we're having this conversation. So let's just wind down for this evening with your final thoughts, and then we will pick up the conversation next week as well. So Delia, you want to go first?
Yes, so what I would like people to take away from tonight's program is that domestic violence can happen across the board, rich or poor, able or disabled. Anybody can be a perpetrator, anybody can be a victim. It is not a one time thing, it happens in cycles, and people have to be alert to catch the red flags and to identify things that may evolve into a more serious situation. Do not focus only on the physical abuse, but look at all the other subtle forms. And we as human beings can identify that this is well rooted in our societies. So we can already begin to think of how can I, as an individual, begin to unlearn some of the things that have caused me hurt and pain and impart that learning, be it one person at a time, because that is how a war is won, soldier by soldier. Yes, you may have an army, but if each soldier doesn't put his shoulder to the wheel and do what has to be done, it will not happen.
Thank you. Thank you. Rasmo?
Uh, I mean, like, Delia says a lot here, right? So I'm not going to repeat what she says. Here's what I want to say. It's prevalent, like Delia says. How can we undo it? I don't know. How does it manifest? Here's the thing. Dominica has a domestic violence epidemic, but it's so silent. It's so silent that we don't believe. We're not talking about it. It happens. Okay, so it's more visible in the ghetto, but it happens across class. Okay, the thing about it is, how do we recruit soldiers in that war against abuse, against domestic violence? And I think the powers that be, but we as activists have to find ways to create opportunity, to show men cooking at home. You know what I mean? I mean, a partner tell me one day a guy going up the step, he was living downstairs, the guy going up the step and he was washing his wife panties. And that to the guy, that was the biggest joke of his life. Okay? Because you know what I mean? That was the most, I mean, like, you never see a man put himself down like that.
Put himself down.
Let me tell you, man. So that is the kind of thing we are using those simple graphic things, but it exists. It exists across the board. So we need, if you say you're a leader, pastor, let me see you cook Sunday and serve dinner. Let us do it. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have all kind of things. Let us create opportunities for that undoing to be visible. Opportunities for the conversation, and honestly, this is a universal platform. People can see it anywhere in the world. But I'm concerned about, honestly, hélas, I, Dominic Ophelia, is a cafe. I mean, like, we're losing. I mean, like, honestly, man, I was little boy. How do you think I learned to write and keep minutes and things now? My mother homeschooled me. She get pregnant, she make me. They pull her, they kick her out of the school. She organized social league for Catholic women. And she homeschooled me, so I learned to write. I become a poet, I become a writer. So women are powerful. and they know how to turn, they know how to create. Give them opportunities, man. Let us organize them. Let's give them resources, Create those groups again. Create the village. Recreate the village, St. Vincent, when you see South Africa, they start to pump pan, When the meeting going on in the house, everybody coming up with their frying pan and their saucepan and thing, and it bound to stop. St. Vincent, they're creating FPGs. They're making a mock trial of the abuser, the rapist, the incest. So we can find traditional ways to do it for our society, okay? And that's just what I want to do. And I'm an artist, so that's what I do. I use it to teach. I sing, I dance, I joke, I do all kind of to teach this thing for us to have a new, better, and healthier society. Simone, thank you. Delia.
Yes. So I'm looking forward to it again. And of course, if you were joining us via TDN Radio, TDN Network, I'm here on Facebook Live, Push Past 10, and TDN TV. We want to say thank you.
Yeah, TDN. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to being with you next week. Maybe we can change the day, a better day that accommodates Rasmo, but we will talk about it.
Schedule changes in a little while, but Wednesday and Thursday,
we will talk about it.
10 until after 2, and it's
right.
But here's the thing: I get here and I just jump on. Usually I'm fatigued because I work in all kind of kids for hours and hours.
So we'll talk about it and figure it out. But Delia, thank you for being here. Rasmo, thank you.
A whole lot of love, my sister. You know that.
Sam George and the controls, thank you for hosting us. And with that, we say a pleasant good evening to everyone. And thank you for joining us for this program. Until next time, take care of yourself.
Amazing. Thanks a lot.